from starvation out of a continent that is the richest continent on earth. It's unacceptable. We need to look at Africa in a very realistic manner and say, why? And we need to move beyond why and then say, what can we do? We can no longer just appreciate problems, know about them, and go on about our merry way. Particularly those of us who are in the diaspora. It's not enough to just get angry at what is happening in a particular country. We gotta take it to the next level. What can we do to do something about it and put an end to it? Because we in the diaspora, we are privileged in the sense that we are in a position to look at Africa with a bird's eye view. Like I often say, it's very difficult for somebody in Lesotho, for somebody in Malawi, in Zambia, in Tunisia, to think continental. They're too busy worrying about when is my next meal coming? Where am I going to sleep tonight? What am I going to feed my children today? How am I going to make ends meet with my business today? For them to then say, think continental. It just can't happen. It's not humanly possible. But we are outside the continent. We have a better view of our beloved continent. And we have a responsibility to do something about it. To whom much is given, much is expected. It is with that understanding that when I left the African Union Mission in Washington, D.C., I felt very strongly that this Africa of ours, in the entire existence of the African diaspora, we have never had a single entity that you can say, if you want to reach out to the African diaspora, you make one phone call and you can reach the African diaspora. That has also worked in a negative way for us as people of African descent living outside Africa. Our heads of states are giving out contracts that should otherwise come to us, to the non-Africans, because they have no way of reaching out to the African diaspora. Allow me to remind you that this position of where we are just disorganized, we are divided, it was created for us by design. We start with slavers, the slavery situation. When the slavers brought the children of Africa across the Atlantic, they intentionally put all kinds of rules that were meant to divide and conquer us, starting with the light-skinned ones. How straight is your nose? All those divisions that kept us from coming together. Look at the Berlin Conference. Again, that was another level that really set Africa in motion for total destruction and the divisions that we see today. And I must remind all of you that Berlin Conference, some might think it's a piece of history. No, it is not. The decisions that took place from that November 1894 to February 1895 in Berlin, Germany, those decisions are still available today. They're impacting your lives today. They are dictating where Africa is today. So we have to be very clear that we are part of a greater strategy to see to it that we remain divided. We have been told that once they raised those flags in between 1950s and 60s, when African countries were getting their independence, we were celebrating independence, but actually we were building concrete walls that actually kept us from talking and speaking and trading with each other as African nations. We must realize those boundaries have got to go. We are children of one mother, Africa. As long as we continue to adhere to those boundaries, Berlin Conference is alive and well, and those who set out to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated centuries ago are still winning. The question is, how long are we going to continue to allow them to win using that very simple rule of divide and conquer? Are you going to continue to accept this rule to win year in, year out? Are you going to look at your children and say, yes, the rule of divide and conquer was put in place centuries ago. I refuse to exit this mode. Or are you going to wake up and say, I can see clearly now. I have been blind for far too long. I understand what has been done to me. It is now my job, my responsibility to be the generation, be part of a generation that's going to turn the corner, be part of a generation that's going to say, enough is enough. No more shall we continue to be blind. Like I like to say, if your children, grandchildren, 20 years from now are going to come to you and say, Grandma, Grandpa, there were problems in our Africa. There were problems with our Black race. What did you do? I would hope the preparation for that answer begins now. And I would hope 20 years from now, you can sit your grandchildren down and say, grandchildren, these were the problems, and articulate them fully. This is what was done to us. Yes, for centuries, we didn't quite understand it. Yes, for centuries, we failed to come together, just like other nationalities do. But we finally did, 2021, 2020 and 21 moving forward. Together, we organized and we put an end to the rule of divide and conquer. And we put an end to the exploitation of our beloved continent. While the mission may not be accomplished, this is where we left off, children, grandchildren, and this is where you need to pick up. They need to be left a legacy of something they can carry forward and finish the unfinished business that our Pan-African fathers started back in 1963 when they met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and came up with a compromise decision, which they called the Organization of African Unity. That mission is yet to be accomplished. It has taken over 50 years, and we're still struggling with unity. Singularly, that remains our biggest enemy until we can overcome this fear and mistrust of each other, until we can overcome the self-hate that exists within us. Nothing we do is going to change. Until we understand that we are victims of the legacy of colonization and the legacy of slavery, nothing is going to change. No degree from any fancy university around the world can decolonize you. No degree can rid you of the legacy of slavery. You see, when you go to the boardroom table as a leader and you are negotiating on behalf of either the diaspora or the continent, you go to the boardroom table with a mind that's suffering from the legacy of slavery and the legacy of colonization. The results are going to be colonized. The results are going to be tarnished with the legacy of slavery. We must accept one thing, my brothers and sisters. We are still suffering from the legacy of slavery and colonization. Too many of us don't even realize that. I know many times I'm talking to young people and I'll talk about colonization and slavery, and they'll say, oh, I'm so glad I don't have that problem. Oh, yes, you do. Why do you feel inferior to our fellow white brothers and sisters? Why do you go home to Africa and the people that are going to discriminate against you are your fellow children? For in my case, it's very painful when I would go into a restaurant and I'm seated first, but a white couple happens to walk in, and my own child, or somebody who could be my own child, he leaves me to go wait on them just because they're white. That's the disease I'm talking about. Why do we feel inferior? Why do we feel we're not as good as everybody else? It's a conversation that each and every one of us must have with image in the mirror. But I'm here to remind you that we are the origins of humanity. As a Black man and a Black woman, you are the mother of humanity. Life as we know it began in Africa. Life as we know it, humanity as we know it, we, the Black women, gave birth to humanity. Why then is it that those who gave birth to humanity are being told, you're scum of the earth? I'm here to tell you, my brothers and sisters, that those are lies. Those are lies. The anthropologists, they went to Europe looking for the origin of life. They went everywhere around the world looking for the origins of humanity. It wasn't until they came to Africa that they found the origins of humanity. No one should ever make you feel inferior because you brought humanity as we know it. Life as we know it, you brought it to the world. The genes that run, the DNA that runs in your veins is the DNA of originality. You gave birth to the world. So why then are you being made to feel inferior? You must stand up tall and stand on the tallest mountain and proclaim to the world who you are. The proud, the beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated, highly adaptable, and totally indestructible. Our Africa was once the center of the world. Our Africa was the one that told the world what it means to be human. Our Africa reached out and advised nations without ever colonizing or exploiting any country, without ever taking over any country. That is who we are as Africans. We told the world what it means to be human. What happened to that Africa? We are the ones who showed the world. We told them about the laws, and then they came in. They took all the civilization that Africa has. They acquired it. And then they turn around and they call themselves civilized. And turn around and tell us uncivilized. And yet their civilization is what they stole from us. I'm saying this to say, my brothers and sisters, know who you are. You have been lied to for far too long. How long are you going to continue to be lied to? And as mothers and fathers, we have a responsibility to make sure that the children that we are raising, the grandchildren that we are raising, they grow up knowing who they are. And that means you must have those right important conversations with them. And under no circumstances, remind them that as they walk out that door every day, they must walk that soil of the earth like they own it because they do. Because they do. So no one should ever make us feel inferior. If we can overcome that, it doesn't matter where you put us. It doesn't matter where we end up. We will thrive. We will overcome because we will be grounded in our motherland, the origin of humanity, the origin of civilization. So let's start by understanding who we are and let's heal ourselves of these two horrible diseases. And once we are healed, the rest is easy. I'd like to end by saying, let's look around at other nationalities, at other races, at other ethnic groups around this beautiful United States of America. Ask for the voices of the Chinese diaspora loud and clear. The Mexican diaspora, the Irish diaspora, the German Americans, the Italian Americans, the Jews, they are all loud and clear. They are united when it comes to their countries of origin. They are anchored in their countries of origin. Everybody in this United States, with the exception of the American Indian, is an immigrant. And they're very much connected to their anchor. The only race that is not connected to their anchor and are refusing to be connected to their anchor are the Black people. We are busy running away from our motherland. Until we get anchored back in Africa, we'll always be like sheep that are all cells and no anger. We'll always be like palm trees. The wind blows this way, here we go. The wind blows that way, here we go. That, my brothers and sisters, has got to come to an end. We are inheritors of one of the most amazing continents on earth. The continent that still has over 80% of her natural resources untapped. The continent that the rest of the world is looking to for their needs. The only problem is the real inheritors of this amazing continent are being told, don't go there. It's a diseased and dying continent. I often tell people, look at me. Do I look diseased and dying? Why do we accept that designation? Africa's problems, the good, the bad, and the ugly, are our problems, and we must own them, and we must commit to doing something about our Africa. I know sometimes, quite often, we get stuck. Oh, these leaders, these and the leaders, that I understand the frustration. However, then what? Then what? Is there something that we can do? We should be problem solvers. I am here to say, my brothers and sisters, yes, there is something we can do. It is with that understanding that when I left office in Washington, D.C., I felt very strongly that there was a need for us to have one entity that we can all come together and speak with one voice. There's one entity that we can say, the brain drain out of Africa that started when the children of Africa were taken out of Africa as slaves by the slavers, and the ones who left Africa more recently in search of greener pastures, in running away from wars, running away from famine. The end result is Africa does not have the capacity Africa needs to build the Africa that we want. Let's be very clear about that. There are more Ghanaian doctors in New York City than in the entire country of Ghana. Why then would any Ghanaian turn around and say, well, I went home and my mother couldn't find this, I couldn't reach a doctor? Well, the doctors are in New York City. President Nana, when he took office, he said the way to do healthcare is by building more hospitals, renovating old ones. Well, guess what? Half of those doctors, hospitals, are sitting, the wards are sitting empty, not because there are no patients, but because there are no doctors. The same is true with all the other African countries. Let's be realistic. The same is true with all the other sectors. We want an Africa that is developed. Well, guess what? We now have the African Continental Free Trade Area. The African Continental Free Trade Area is saying, come 2021, African countries are going to go to the world market as one customs union. No more shall we go in as 55 different countries. We are going to fight as one, negotiate as one. The boundaries that have kept us from negotiating and trading with each other as African countries are going to be melting away. The policies that were keeping us from moving together and trading with each other are being harmonized. When the African Continental Free Trade Area is implemented, 90% of the goods traded within Africa are going to be duty-free. And the world is watching. They are watching that Africa that has everything they need. The Chinese are just waiting for this Africa that is now easy to do business, where you can register your business in one country and you spread like wildfire throughout the continent. The Europeans who have already been there, they're getting ready to double up their presence. The Middle Easterners, the Indians, the Russians, the Japanese, everybody, they have the money, they have the expertise. And what they're counting on is the fact that the children of Africa are still fast asleep. And they're just going to walk in. And this time, the takeover is going to be complete. Complete takeover. And here's what's going to happen, my brothers and sisters. We are going to be reduced to be workers. We are going to be reduced to being happy that now we can ride a train from Cape Town to Cairo and you wake up in the morning and by night you are in Cairo. We are happy that there's a train for us to catch. Who owns it? Who is truly making money out of the train? We are happy that there's planes now. We can fly from one country to the other, and it's wonderful, easy transportation. But who owns the aircraft? Who owns the airport? That's what's going to happen, my brothers and sisters, if we don't come together. Africa is going to be developed. The question is, who's going to build that generational world that others have built outside Africa? They have built generational wealth for their children. Now they are getting ready to build generational wealth for their children again in our Africa. And we will continue to be reduced to being workers. I don't think that's what you want. The Inga Dam, when complete, is going to light up all of Africa and parts of Europe. But guess what? If we don't have enough money to play, we are going to be happy that we have electricity. My brothers and sisters, may I say to you, this moment is calling for ownership. True ownership of our continent. That is why we have got to understand the African Continental Free Trade Area fully. That is why we must strategize and be in a position to be owners of our continent. This is not something that we can do as individuals, going to Africa as a small company and doing this and doing that. No, this moment is calling for collaboration because these opportunities are massive, massive opportunities. But we can only do this when we come together and approach our continent united. We must collaborate with our brothers and sisters on the continent. So today, I thought I might take some moment and give you an idea, an overview of the African Diaspora Development Institute, the entity that was created based on the fact that there was no single entity that one could come to if they wanted to reach out to Africa. One, secondly, we also wanted to make sure that we stop the African heads of states from giving priority of contracts to outsiders. We want them to start with the children of Africa. And I can tell you that is beginning to bear fruit. Right now, we have a conference lined up in November 8th, I believe is the date. Tanzania is sending us an entity that's going to present all the government projects that we can participate in as African diaspora. Next, we're also going to have Zambia. They're going to come in and give us a presentation of all the government projects that we diaspora can participate in. We're going to be lining up different countries to come and address all of you and tell you about all the projects that the government has that they would like all of us to have priority. That's what I'm talking about.